I am Tricia Kerr. I'm the ESOL Program Director with the Division of Elementary and Secondary Education. And I appreciate each of you making some time today. We are recording this, so if you need to watch it later or share with some colleagues, you're free to do so. As we go throughout this, we know you may have questions, so please feel free to either submit them in the Q&A tab that is on your screen, or put them in the chat box, okay? So the two places that you can put questions is either on the Q&A tab or in the chat box. With me today, the panel, in case we need any of them to help answer some questions and so that you know who they are, we have a variety of our support staff with us. I'll let each of them introduce themselves briefly. We'll start with Alan. Alan, you're muted. Okay, why don't we go on to Paula?
Good morning, I'm Paula Vasquez, and I am the Central Arkansas Region English Learner Specialist.
Thank you. Tracy. You're muted.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Tracy Leone, and I cover the Northeast region.
Okay. Jana.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jana Catlett. I cover the Southwest and Southeast at the moment.
Okay. And Lisa.
Good Wednesday morning, everybody. I'm Lisa Coates. I cover the Northwest corner, also with OUR Co-op and Guy Fenner Co-op.
Good. I'm glad that you're all here. Alan was here and he'll be back, I'm sure, when he's able to. I will attempt to put the link out one more time. If you are having trouble hearing, I'd encourage you to check your sound on your own computer. We're not getting a lot of people saying they can't hear, but if that becomes an ongoing problem, please continue to let us know in the chat box. Okay. As I've indicated, you can find the PDF of today's presentation at this bit.ly. Make sure it's typed exactly like it says there. I've entered it again in the chat box. It should work there. So let's get started. Okay, today we have several things we're going to talk about related to school closures and English learners and some of the impact that that's had on all of you. But first, what I want to find out is who is with us, what areas of the state. So we're going to try this out and find out where are you from. There's a handy little thing we can use called mentimeter.com. So if on your device, if you would go to mentimeter.com, and I'm going to try to do that here on the screen for us all as well. You'll click on that. It should be mentimeter.com. Let me switch my screen. Share so that you can see what I'm seeing. Okay, can you see my screen? Paula, Lisa, can you guys see my screen where it says Mentimeter? And there's a map. Okay, it says, which region of Arkansas are you from? So we have 5 different regions there that you can pick. So if you would go to mentimeter.com, and I'll put that in the chat box, and you will enter the code 444696. Okay, so it'll look like that. So if you would get in there and just answer your what region you're from, they need to go to mentimeter.com and enter that. Okay, some are saying go to menti.com.
It changes to many.
Okay, you should be able to answer. I'm going to try to answer it myself. You click your answer and then click submit. Okay. I'm going to switch screens here while you're voting. Okay, and give you a couple more. It looks like 125 have responded. I'll give you about another 30 seconds, and then we will look at the results. Okay, here is where we are represented. Now, if you can see can you see the chart now on the screen of where everyone's from? So it looks like we have, good representation from across the state. We know that some areas like Southeast and Northeast, you're growing and stuff, but I'm pleased to see we have people from every region. So thank you for being here. So just to find out who all's on the call, what area that you are representing. Okay, now let's get back to the presentation. Okay. Okay. So the topics that we're going to cover today, we're going to talk about a reminder about the Arkansas Entrance and Exit Manual, that we do have one and you should be using it, and a reminder of where it is located. We'll be talking an update on the Arkansas Professional Judgment Rubric Guidance and some updates for this spring, since we are in this unprecedented time of some things not being as usual. We will talk about LPAC timing. When do those need to occur, especially for annual reviews? We'll briefly talk about the process for monitoring former English learners. There is an update on the Home Language Usage Survey. We'll give you an update on the District English Learner Plans Review and what we've been doing and what to expect on that. I'll have another reminder about the ESOL Institutes that are coming up, as well as some summer DESE PD options that we have related to meeting the needs of English learners. There'll be several times we'll stop for questions throughout. So when we get to those stop points, I'll have my panelists share with me any questions that are coming in, either at the Q&A tab or in the chat box. Okay. So, my screen. So on the Arkansas Entrance and Exit Procedures Manual, this is just a reminder of where this is located. It is required by ESSA. It is part of what Arkansas submitted. We had a group of stakeholders give input to this as we went, and it was submitted and approved in 2018. This has to be standardized across the state. The idea is that regardless of what district a student enrolls in, the outcome of whether a student is an English learner or not should be the same. The actual services you provide, that will be differentiated across districts as per student need once you know who your students are. It is located on the DESE English Learner webpage. I provided a link within the presentation that you could go to. And then I just did a little screenshot of the section where it has this actual manual. You'll notice there that there is a webinar on using the English Learner Entrance and Exit Procedures Manual. There's a PDF and a video. We're not going to go through all parts of it, but if you need more information about that, then you can go there to brush up on what that is, or to get information on what that entrance and exit procedures manual is. Today, we're mainly talking about some things that might be adjusted or clarified due to the situation caused with COVID-19. So regarding the entry and exit procedures related to COVID-19, first of all, we have asked but have received no official federal guidance on how we're supposed to address our timelines or even services of English learners. The main thing that has come across is that, number one, you must continue to provide for your students in terms of civil rights issues. The civil rights still apply even during this time of school closures or remote learning. The guidance that has been distributed by the feds related to special education, for example, has emphasized that timelines are not waived. They still are in existence. However, if due to the requirements from the health department regarding how you can interact with students face-to-face, prevent you from fulfilling a timeline, you simply must have document why the timeline is not being fulfilled at this moment and what your plan is to remedy that once you are able to do so. So as a reminder, the initial identification of students, so that's a new student to your district, they come, and that's one thing too, if a student tries to come and enroll in your district, even now, you need to let them enroll and work with them. There's no waiver of that 14-day or 30-day time, putting both there as a reminder. 14 days is what we're in right now as far as if a student were to enroll today, you have 14 days to identify and place and notify parents. You don't have a waiver of that, so what do? Once school begins, we have a 30-day timeline for identifying new students, placing them and notifying their parents within that 30 days. As we get closer to the beginning of next school year, if we get further information from federal guidance, then we will readdress this. So what do you do in the meantime? Well, first of all, you're going to look and see if they are a transfer within Arkansas, then you need to locate their prior LPA 21 results, an LPAC decision, and proceed accordingly. You will have the information you need to make that placement. If they're transferring from another LPA 21 state, then you can locate their LPA 21 results and proceed accordingly. You will have the data you need to go ahead and place within the timeline. Here's where it gets a little tougher. If they're new or from outside of Arkansas, you're not going to have LPA 21 results. You need to conduct an interview with the family or student. This means that you provide supports for now that appear appropriate for that student. You would resume screenings in person when you're able to safely do so. And you communicate this support plan and the requirement to conduct LPA 21 screening when able to the parents. They are the ones that need to know, here are the services we're going to provide through the remote learning time. Here are the supports your student will get that are appropriate for what we can gather from just visiting with you about what they need. And this is where you need to use some common sense. One example that's been shared with me, a student just moved here from Honduras. They don't speak any English. It is very obvious that that child is a newcomer student at the emerging level of learning English, and they will need a great deal of support. So even though they haven't been able to officially identify them as an English learner because they have not been able to actually administer the LPA 21 screening, which has to be done one-on-one, they are initially providing support, and they have informed the parent, we're going to provide these supports. Once we can come back to school or get into a situation where face-to-face screening is allowed, then we will have to finish and conduct the screening. You just need to keep documentation, a reason why you're not officially screening within that 14 days or 30 days. Document that on your initial placement form once you have that form done, as being unable to complete due to a COVID-19 school closure and health guidelines. But what do you do in eSchool? So for eSchool data entry, these first 3 items are in green. All new language minority students to your district during this closure time, you must have their language other than English entered, the student language from the appropriate fields and the guardian language from the appropriate fields. You must check the ESL box because they're a language minority student. And then you can still indicate the EL entry date. That is the first day enrolled in any US school, not just your school. Remember, that's any US school. You can put those, and you need to put that data in for your new language minority students during the closure time. If they're a transfer student and they have LPA 21 scores and you can complete their entire placement, then you place appropriately and enter the remaining data as normal. If they're new to Arkansas and you cannot do the LPA 21 screener, keep a list for yourself of who needs to complete the screening and do not check the value box indicating English learner status. You just keep track of the fact that you will need to go back and finish that. You do not indicate they're an English learner until you have completed the process. We know that's going to make your language minority student error report wacky right now. You're going to have several errors showing up because you will have new kids on there that you cannot complete the data. As we get closer to fall beginning, we will issue further guidance on what to do, especially if for some reason these closures continue beyond the beginning of school. I do not know anything about that at this time. So, are there questions coming in that we need to address?
The one about the states that use LPA 21 in the Q&A, I Googled it and it was an old list, so please refer to Dr. Lytle's list on that Q&A, and he also pasted that into the chat box. So ignore my answer.
Okay. Yes, so I'm looking at the chat box for who is for the LPA 21 states.
The LPA 21 states are Arkansas, Iowa, Louisiana, Nebraska, Ohio, Oregon, Washington, and West Virginia. There's a specific tab in the LPA 21 Live Binder, and I'll continue it from year to year, and it's called LPA 21 States. As they change, I'll modify the list.
Okay. I see a question in the Q&A. Says, I have 2 students that transferred from other Arkansas schools, but were not enrolled anywhere during the testing window. Based on Tri-N, they are EL students. Should I just document that they will need screening at the beginning of the year? I would contact them and the prior district and find out when their last screening was. If it had been at the beginning of this school year, for example, you could continue placement based on that screening. If it's older than that, then you will need to complete the screening, update it at the beginning of the school year. Okay, we're going to go on to our next section. Okay, so the Arkansas Professional Judgment Rubric, Guidance and Updates for Spring 2020. As you know, we do have a process for not just entering students, but how do we exit them and how do we monitor them every year to determine what their next year's placement is. So one of the questions that have been proposed and by different states, SEA leaders like Alan and myself from other states, we work with the Council of Chief State School Officers in several different working groups related to serving English learners. And this is one of the questions that CCSSO asked and an answer they provided. And it helps inform the next part of our discussion together. Will states be allowed to use alternate one-time exiting paths that do not match the ESSA state plan? Additionally, given the receipt of some testing results, may states use an alternate path for those that do not have assessment results and the regular exit path for those with results. And they point out that in the ESEA section 3113, that requires each state establish and implement standardized statewide EL entrance and exit procedures. Presumably, all states adopted those procedures and had them approved by the Department of Ed as part of our state plan. It appears then that states would need to amend their plans in order to begin using different procedures, and that using procedures that are not statewide would require a waiver. That is a very complicated process and not one that we are wanting to do at this time as far as amending our ESSA state plan. So the procedures we're going to talk about will be in place, and we're going to just talk about how can we still use what we already have. Good news for Arkansas, we actually completed our LPA 21 assessment window. Many states either were in the middle of their window or did not even begin their window yet. So we are in a better place overall for Arkansas as far as determining placements for existing students for next year, in that you do now have your LPA 21 results. A reminder on what the common exit procedures are. This is from the Arkansas Entry and Exit Procedures Manual. This is one you have to actually look at the manual online, but the LEAs have to annually review every identified English learner's progress in acquiring English. This is done once you have LPA 21 results. So who does this? It's a site-based language proficiency and assessment committee. That's what an LPAC is. These annual reviews include an analysis of LPA 21 summative assessment scores and other available student performance data. Your exit and placement decisions must be made by and documented in eSchool no later than September 30th of each school year for continuously enrolled students. So that means students you have right now, and we'll talk about timing of when this has to be done, but bottom line, you have to have all the current students reviewed and their placements updated by September 30th. So what are these criteria for the annual review placement? This also comes from the Entry and Exit Procedures Manual. What you do, first of all, is you have your LPA 21 score, and you can see there on the top row that their overall summative overall score, you will get emerging, progressing, or proficient. If they're emerging or progressing, they are going to be an English learner the next year. No other decision needs to be made. You would recommend appropriate services and notify parents, and they continue identification as an English learner. If, however, they have a summative overall score on LPA 21 of proficient, then you need to use the professional judgment rubric, which we'll talk about in just a minute. If on that rubric it's determined they're not proficient, then they continue as an English learner. If on that rubric it's determined that they are proficient, then you recommend exit to former English learner status. You exit them and you will monitor them for 4 years to ensure continued success and notify parents of that exit. So where do you find this Arkansas Professional Judgment Rubric information? Okay, just a reminder, it was required by ESSA. It has to be standardized across the state. It is located on the DESE English Learner webpage. I have it linked there for you, and I did a little screenshot of what you are looking for. The document in red, you can see here, says Arkansas Professional Judgment Rubric Exit Criteria Guidance. You can open that up and see what it is and the items that are on there that you can use. We'll talk about it briefly here in a minute. Notice there is a commissioner's memo there outlining the expectation, as well as a webinar on how to use the professional judgment rubric. Overall, the same process applies. We have a glitch this year, which we're going to talk about, but overall the process is the same. So you could go watch that webinar and the video from it to determine how to apply this process if you're not familiar with that. Purpose of today's meeting is to talk about any adjustments we're going to make. So just a reminder of what the professional judgment rubric does. In order to exit from English learner status in Arkansas, the LPAC has to verify that there are 3 pieces of evidence supporting the decision. That's called triangulation of data to support an educational decision. That's what our stakeholders wanted in Arkansas, and we have that backed up with some research in our ESOL plan. Once those 3 pieces of supporting evidence are available, one of which includes the proficient score in LPA 21, the LPAC must exit the student and begin the monitoring process. It's not an if you would like to, it's a must exit them. The goal is to determine when language minority students are ready to be identified as former English learners in a timely and appropriate manner. So a reminder of what the exit criteria are. Our 3 data points are LPA 21 assessment data. The proficiency profile has to be proficient. Then the professional judgment rubric, which is looking at supporting evidence, you have to have sufficient evidence that provides 2 pieces of local data that demonstrate success in literacy through English language arts, science, social studies, and/or math as comparable to your non-English learner native English speaking peers. So what data are we going to use this year? You continue using the data you've had before. We'll start here and then do some clarifying points. What you'll do with students. So we're talking about the kids who have an LPA 21 score proficient, okay? You will look at their information. If you have 2 or more data points that are in that professional judgment rubric list of acceptable data from the 1920 school year, then you make the exit decision based on that data, okay? So for example, let's say that you have been doing the interim math assessments, and you've got an interim math assessment that says that that student is ready. And you've also been doing star reading, okay? And you have a star reading result that indicates they are on, right at grade level. You now have 2 data points that were from this school year. So with those 2 data points, the LPA 21 score proficient, you would exit them. Okay. Well, what if you're in the situation here of you have 1 or 0 data points from the current school year? That means they don't exist. Not that they didn't meet, they weren't high enough, but you don't even have them to look at. You cannot locate them. For those students only, you may consider the spring 2019 ACT Aspire scores and make your exit decision. Okay. Okay, so you look and they don't have any spring 2019 ACT Aspire scores. They just don't exist. Okay, so you have 1 or 0 data points from this current school year. You have no spring 2019 ACT Aspire scores to even look at. Well, as of now, you wouldn't be able to exit them. If when you come back, you conduct fall 2020 assessments when they return, those could be used as additional data points and make your exit decision. But we're only using fall 2020 assessments that you may do, and that would all have to be completed by September 30th, results and decision and everything, if you have no other data to look at. Okay, so if you don't have any other data to look at, or you only have 1 data point, then you can use fall 20 data to determine whether or not to exit that student. Otherwise, if all you have is an LPA 21 score proficient and no data points, they have to continue as an English learner until you can obtain those data points to look at. So some other guidelines on that: use the most recently available data points for determining whether or not a student has 2 points, indicating they have academic literacy skills at a level commensurate with English only peers. Within the last year, the most recent data prevails. So if you have interim math data, you're going to use the most recent one. If no data or only 1 data point from this school year is available to consider, then you may use last available data from ACT Aspire. That's mainly going to happen in your upper grades. Okay, we tend to have a lot of other data for other grades. Okay, here are some examples of evidence in addition to what has already been specifically mentioned in the professional judgment rubric guidance. Look at that, there's a whole long list of things you can use. But here are some things that maybe weren't as clear in that. You can use ACT Aspire interim assessments. They weren't named out in that in the regular guidance. You can use iStation, which is referenced in that guidance, NWEA, Renaissance tools, dyslexia screening instruments, Imagine Learning Placement Test, that's a software learning system, or assessments that are utilized by your RTI and PLC teams to determine if students are on grade level or need interventions. We can't possibly know every kind of assessment you've been using. If you're in doubt, email me and I can say, yes, that's fine, use it. So on ACT Aspire interim scores, what are you looking at? Okay, you need.
Tricia,
Yes.
someone asked that you slow down a little bit.
Okay, sorry. I will slow down. On the ACT Aspire interim scores, there are different data points you can use. I have a link to a document. I'll just go ahead and open it. So I'll slow down now because I have to switch between screens, I think.
Would you like to go ahead and answer 2 Q&A questions while you're doing that?
Sure, sure.
Okay. Question number 1. Can we use different parts of NWEA reading as separate data points, like language and writing and vocabulary use function are 2 different aspects? This is for primary.
I believe we're looking for reading as a whole. So you would need to look at reading and then look at math.
Okay, and then here's the second one. Can a MAP screener, not the growth test, data point count?
Alan, are you familiar with the MAP screener versus the growth test?
No, I'm not. I mean, mostly I work on the growth side. I mean, the concept is the screener is given at the beginning, just like any screener would be, but it's not going to have a growth calculation to it.
Right. You don't have to use the growth calculation because sometimes all you have is their initial assessment. Megan Oakes gives a RIT score and percentile. Yes. Yeah. You may use the MAP screener, then the RIT score and percentile in order to, you may use that. In fact, I think I'm getting ready to mention that in a future slide. Okay.
And then one more just came in that's very similar. Can iReady diagnostic assessments be used as a data point? Those are similar to the other one that we just answered, but I'm not sure that they give RIT scores.
Yes, I think we're going to talk in a minute about what iReady scores you can use and how to look at them in a slide coming up.
Yeah, and I think someone was asking for clarification. They can use the math reading and math, or the math language can also be used, or the language can also be used for 2 data points in the chat.
Okay. There are 2 different assessments in math. There's a reading and a language and a math, correct? Mm-hmm. Those are 3 separate data points you can use. What you can't do is if there are 2 subtests that make up the language score, you're not looking at the subtest of the language score. Can Dibble's assessments be used? Yes, you may use Dibble's assessments. You're looking at more of the overarching result of a Dibble's assessment, not letter ID by itself. Letter ID is a component of a bigger result. You're looking at that bigger result. Okay. So for ACT Aspire interim results, there's this chart that you can look and see what the benchmark score is for each grade level. And if that benchmark score is met and their score on the ACT Aspire interim is above that, and you're looking at these 4 areas, English, math, reading, and science, if they meet the benchmark in that area, then it counts as a data point. Another way to look at that, I have an example on Triand that I've provided. I'm trying to open it for you. I'm trying to zoom into there, sorry. Oh, there it is. Okay, this would be what you might see on Triand for an interim result. Here is ACT Aspire from February. This is math. You are looking for this math readiness benchmark to say why. On this student, it says N. In order to determine if that's a Y or an N, they're looking at this scale score above, which is 156 at grade 9. If you were to look at that chart, then it wouldn't meet the score. So let's compare this to that chart. Hopefully I can switch between my tabs here. So for instance, this is 9th grade. Their score was 156, their math scale score. So let's see, using that chart for 9th grade, is that high enough? Okay, 9th grade in math, in order for them to be high enough, it has to be a 159. So using this chart, the benchmark is 159. The student had a 156, so that point doesn't count for this student. So you can either use the math, this chart, or you can use the Triand where it will say math readiness benchmark no. You can also look at reading readiness benchmark, yes or no, and there'll be a science one or a language one, okay? Someone has asked, we use math to determine literacy. Part of the federal definition of an English learner is that their listening, speaking, reading, and writing scores, their proficiency in those areas, you have to look at that. And then is their proficiency in English preventing them from performing on academic assessments? Well, how do you know that? You look at academic assessments. There is academic language involved in the math test. There's academic language involved on the reading test, on the science test, on these other assessments. So we're looking at, in academic language terms, are they doing okay? If they're doing okay, then we know most likely language is no longer a factor impacting them negatively, or at least preventing them from performing at a level commensurate with their English-only peers. That doesn't mean, though, that for a student to exit English Learner Services, that they have to be flying high in every area. They may still have a couple of areas that are struggling, but we need to see that they are successful in a couple of areas as well, in addition to their LPA 21 proficient score, okay? I do see a question coming in about iStation. With iStation this year, they changed from tier 1, 2, 3 to a tier 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, with 3, 4, and 5 being green. What tier is proficient with this new scale? I'll go back and we'll show you that in just a minute, okay? Let me get back and see if the next couple of slides will answer the questions about how to look at some of these other scores, because that's what a lot of the questions coming in are. Okay. So on iStation, they have instructional tier goals, and these have to be consistent. I'm just going to read this, okay? Because this came from iStation, and Alan, jump in if I'm not making sense. Instructional tier goals consistent with other reading and math assessments. iStation has defined a 3-tier normative grouping based on indices associated with the 20th and 40th percentiles. Students with an index above the 40th percentile for their grade are placed in tier 1. Students with an index at or below the 20th percentile are in tier 3. These tiers are then used to guide educators in determining the level of instruction for each student. Tier 1 students above the 40th percentile are on track and performing at grade level. And then it talks about the other two. So if you're using iStation with these 3 tiers, this was our most recent information from them, then you'll look for the 40th percentile. If they are adjusting how they're describing that, what you're looking for in any assessment is what is the performance level expected of students to be considered on track and performing at grade level. Whatever that is for that assessment, that's the score you're looking for. Okay? Well, let's see what NWEA shows it as. Okay, NWEA, there are these quadrants on here. On the left side, the right side, I have left and right mixed up, but on the right side, it says high achievement, okay? Any of these, notice it's above the 50th percentile. Anybody above the 50th percentile is at grade level in achievement, and that's what you're looking for, okay? So anyone that's in this upper right quadrant or the lower right quadrant, they would qualify to be, that score would count as being evidence of being at grade level. You can also look at the RIT range scores, and there's charts provided from NWEA about the RIT range and the percentile. If that student is high enough, you're looking at a percentile 50th and above. There are charts in there that will tell you if they're considered at grade level. I can't show you all those at this time. I'm just trying to give you a clue at what to look for. If you're using Renaissance, you're looking for the green bucket. So these are used in STAR Early Literacy, STAR Reading, STAR Math. They will put kids in the green bucket. That means at or above their benchmark, because students are meeting or exceeding the benchmark score, which is at or above the 40th percentile. So if kids have a STAR Early Literacy, STAR Reading, or STAR Math within this green bucket, then those would count as a data point that is sufficient to exit. So you've gathered all these data points. How do you determine if it's ready to exit? If you've looked, you've got the data points, you've looked at 2 or more, you have to have 2 to look at. You could have 10. But you don't have to have 10. Whatever you have, you look at, okay? If all of them, none of them are strong enough, they're close, they're in need of support, they're at the 20th percentile, they're 2 grades below grade level, nothing is at grade level, nothing is okay, they are not proficient on this rubric. If you have one piece, you've had 2 things you look at or 5 things you look at, and only one piece is ready, they're not ready, then they're not qualifying to exit. That's not enough data. If you have 2 pieces of strong data means at grade level. So they have a STAR Reading that's high enough, and then they have an interim math assessment that's high enough. If those 2 are there, then they meet the professional judgment rubric as proficient. And of course, anything above that, 3, 4, 5, if they have more than that, well, then they meet it. Okay, now we're going to be at another checkpoint. What questions do we have now?
Okay, there is one wanting to know if you have a sample of a writing portfolio and or a rubric.
We could look into that. I don't have one to show you right now. I do recall being at a training last spring, it was last fall, about using a writing rubric for evaluating students writing who might, be needing special education services who are English learners. The key to the writing rubric is it needs to be tied back to the Arkansas English Language Arts standards and the rubrics that they're using to assess those standards. So if someone out there is using a writing rubric and would like to share that with us, that we could share with others, that would be good. Otherwise, we'll put it on our list to try to locate one as an example.
And Tricia, in the chat, there still seems to be a little bit of confusion about the most recent data to be used. Can you address that? The question I'm looking at came from Maria. For the rubric, if the most recent score is low, but one closely preceding it was on level, can we still exit them if we find reasonable evidence? And I think as I look at the rest of the chat, there seems to be confusion with that. So do you understand my question?
Right. When we ran this by this is tricky because interim assessment measures different things than a summative, okay?
Yeah, I had responded what we
Basically,
talked about. Yeah.
I think we decided that it needed to be the most recent assessment that they took. So if they have a September and a December, the December one needs to be okay. If they only have a September, you may use September. Okay?
Okay, I just know that that has come up several times and I thought maybe if we heard it one more time.
No. So most recent means if you have 3 interim assessment results for math, you will use the most recent one. Okay, it also means, okay, you have 3 interim assessment results for math. They're all okay. You've got 3 data points? No, that's math. The most recent, okay? You would need that plus another area, another assessment. It could be a totally different assessment of math and qualify, but it needs to be the most recent, okay? I'm trying to see.
Tricia, they're asking if you can go back to the slide and review.
Which slide?
I think it's the one that you were just talking about.
Okay, let me get on there. This one?
Tricia, it's the one with the arrows that go from left to right, has the 3 arrows. You know, if you've got the 2 data points, if you've got the 1 data point, or if you've got that one more backwards. No. That one.
This one? Okay. We'll review this one again, and that's fine. Okay. The first thing you do, this is kind of like a decision tree. If you can make the decision moving from left to right, you start on the left. That's the first thing you'll look at, okay? So you're looking and seeing, do I have 2 or more data points located from the 1920 school year? Okay, you have interim math assessment and interim reading assessment. You have 2 data points, and you look at that and you make their exit decision based on that data, and you're done. Okay, the next block, you don't have the 2 data points. You have 1 or 0 data points from the 1920 school year. Maybe I talked to a district the other day that, and this varies by school within their district. One school only does the math interim assessment. Another school only did the reading interim assessment, okay? So let's go to school that has the math interim assessment. That's the only assessment type point they're using, and I think it was in a junior high. So that kid had a math assessment score that said they were ready. But that's only 1 data point. So then I said they could look at the spring 2019 ACT Aspire scores and use those to make an exit decision. So for a kid in that situation, their December 19 math interim was ready. And then they look and saw that on the reading on ACT Aspire, it was ready. Then they can exit. Okay, then the next group, you only had 1 or 0 data points from 1920. So let's pretend it's that example of they do the math interim assessment this year. They did that, but they look back and there's no spring 2019 Aspire scores to look at. They didn't take it. They didn't come from here. They're at a grade, there might be a 12th grader that didn't have that score. Okay, well, 12th graders not going to be able to come back in the fall, but 11th grader who didn't have that score. Then you may utilize assessments conducted in the fall 20 as an additional data point and make your decision. Okay. Okay, I'm seeing, can Edulastic interim assessments be used? I'm not familiar with that tool, but if it's comparable to Aspire interim assessments, then they should be. Feel free to email me that question and I can double check. Okay.
Tricia, there's also a question. Are we able to use out-of-state testing? Not language testing, I'm assuming, but
Right.
other state testing.
Thank you for that question. Yes, if it's from the 1920 school year and they came, or you're in that 1 or 0 data points from this school year, if you needed to look at their spring 2019 SAT 10 scores or Iowa assessment or Texas, I forget what they call it, but any of the state content area assessments from other states, you could use those scores as one of the data points to consider. The only kind of test data you may not use from another state is an English language proficiency assessment. You may only use LPA 21 scores. You may not use WIDA. You may not use Texas's LPA assessment. You have to use LPA 21 scores. Okay, I have, for clarification, for the middle arrow, 1 data point, in my example, math, can come from the 1920 school year testing data. And the second data point, say reading, can come from the spring 2019 data. That is correct. And then you would make your decision. Okay, 1 point from each of 2 assessment sources.
Can I ask one more question just because I'm going to get asked again? That out-of-state question, the end of that, as I'm reading it a little more carefully, says they were last, oh, no, never mind. I thought that was in the AR test. And I'm like, wait a minute. So never mind.
Okay.
Cut me out of the recording when you do.
Okay. Okay, let's try catching up here and see if some of these other questions are answered. So what is the timing for these annual reviews? First of all, you're supposed to primarily be using data from the 2019-20 school year. It must be conducted once you have LPA 21 results available. You've got them. Exit placement decisions must be made by and documented in eSchool no later than September 30th of each school year for continuously enrolled students. So for the kids you have now, you have to have that placement decision completed, all parts of it, by September 30th. So it's really a district decision on exact timing of that LPAC for your current students. It could be in May, it could be in the summer, it could be August, September. We suggest you do it in May or summer due to the need to conduct screenings on new language minority students within the first 30 days of school. If you wait until school starts to have to do all your annual reviews and screen your new students, you probably will, I have found most districts find that very hard to handle, to do all of that at one time. Also, your spring 2020 LPAC members, they may know the students better than the fall teachers will know them. So, you know, when you're trying to determine, do they still need, what kind of English learner services do they need? The current teachers may better understand what they need more than a new one would, but those are just things to consider. A question I've been asked is, may you do these electronically or via Zoom and have signatures documented? Yes, you may, by typing the signature or indicating it's conducted virtually due to COVID-19. Okay, that is fine. We want you to stay safe. So part of the annual review process is you are also supposed to be monitoring your former ELs. This is just a reminder, your former ELs are supposed to be monitored years 1 to 4, and they have to continue to receive appropriate academic supports as needed. Someone had asked, well, what does that mean? That's when you look at, for any kid who is struggling, what would you do for them? If they're an English only student, would you maybe do an intervention group for a little while to see if that helped? Would you allow more time on an assignment? I know you may not be able to do that in testing because they don't have an official accommodation, but you keep supporting that student as you would support any struggling student if they are struggling. Because remember, to exit, we're not saying they are at grade level in everything and don't need any more help to keep doing well. We're just saying that language is no longer the driving factor behind why they're struggling. One thing I've encouraged people to think about is, because some people say, well, they're struggling, if I could put them back as an EL, they do better. And then I'm like, okay, what really will you be doing differently with them as a high-level English learner than you would do with them as a struggling former English learner? Are there different services you would provide? Why are they different? Because it's done by an ESOL person? I mean, if it truly means they need different services that you cannot do unless they're an English learner, and you have the, you know, they don't have 2 data points, then you can bring them back. But they may struggle a little bit as a former English learner. That's okay. After they finish 4 successful years of monitoring, then they're released from monitoring if they continue to show they're doing okay. You may determine that students who no longer demonstrate language and grade level proficiency should be transitioned back to an English language development program as an English learner. That's if they don't have the 2 data points. So as a reminder, it's a very similar screen as what we use for exiting. If you have 2 or more data points from the 1920 school year, you make your monitoring decision based on that. If you only have 1 or 0 data points, you can look at spring 2019 and make your decision. Or if you have 1 or 0 data points and no spring ACT Aspire scores to consider, you can utilize assessments done in the fall 20 as an additional data point. One thing I will clarify on the next slide, you keep using the most recently available data points. Within the last year, the most recent data prevails, just like with when we're looking at exiting. If no data or only 1 data point, you may use last available data from the end of the last school year, or use fall 20 assessments if you truly don't have enough data to look at, as long as you have the decision made by September 30th. But here's the big key. Do not return students to EL status simply due to lack of available data. Okay? That is not fair. Keep an eye on them with other things. If there's a specific student you're concerned about and you want to consider returning them to English learner status and you don't have enough data to make that decision, get in touch with me. Okay, but right now we're saying you do not bring them back because you only have 1 data point. That 1 data point says they're struggling, you don't bring them back automatically. Okay? But talk to me if you have a kid in that situation. I know this is confusing, but hopefully it's a little more clear. Are there any more questions right now?
I think we've got them all up to date unless any come in the next few seconds.
And we're at the end of our time. There are some other items on here that are more for announcement purposes than anything else. The next two slides, I'm going to go ahead and continue. Evan, are we allowed to continue?
Tricia, we do have one question.
Okay.
It is with, can they use USA Test Prep?
Please send me information about that and I'll let you know. I'm not familiar with that. Okay. Okay, this was the primary purpose of today's session, what we've covered up to date. I will briefly talk about the next things on the slideshow. The next one especially, there will be more training coming up on our back to school data entry training. There is a new version of the home language usage survey. It will be posted on the English Learner webpage shortly. The changes were made, changed wording from being ADE to DESE, plus the last set of questions. We have to ask about Puerto Rico differently. Question 8 used to include Puerto Rico in it, but now question 8 is only supposed to include when did your child first attend a school in the United States, the 50 states and DC. That's what that is, because we use this date for your English learner entry date, because that is the date used to determine recently arrived English learner status. And you'll also ask if your child's attended a school in Puerto Rico. You do not have to redo language surveys. If you've already been doing some right now for next school year, you don't have to redo those. Begin using the new version as soon as practical, but by fall 2020. Here's the key to it is you'll need to be able to determine which of your students who've been in Puerto Rico schools are recently arrived English learners and which ones might be immigrant students. If there's a chart there listed, and we'll go over this further in the future training at the ADE Summit on EL data entry. So there'll be more training. This is more like a heads up, but the big deal with Puerto Rico, how you look at Puerto Rico schools differs for determining recently arrived English learner status versus recent immigrant student status. So we will get back to that one, okay? Were there any immediate questions about that?
Yes, Tricia. One question has come in asking if we are going to have that as a digital piece, the HLUS, since more of our parents will be registering online now.
That is up to your district on how to do that. I do mention you may conduct these electronically if all the questions and the explanation for the questions is included in your digital format. Some districts were already doing that. It's not okay just to move to a digital format and say, is a language other than English in your home? Yes or no. You can't do that. You have to have these same questions, but you may do that, and each district does it differently. We do have it as a form fillable PDF in Transact, and the version we'll post on the DESE website will be form fillable as well, which might help you with that, parents being able to fill it out, save it and return it, or fill it out, print it out and turn it in. So there'll be some options that way. Okay.
And Valerie, with yours, with the approving the digital copy of that, as long as it has all that information and all the explanations on the HLUS that will be posted on the website, as long as you've got that, that's your approval. So just make sure that everything is included on your digital format.
we would be glad to look at it if you send us the link to look at it to review, but we don't have to look at it. Okay.
And there's the new home language survey. Is it available now to access?
In this slideshow, you have the English version linked. The new ones will be posted on the DESE webpage by next week.
Tricia, will they also be in Transact by then?
Yes. And they're now available in 10 languages. So, okay. Okay, some of you have been involved in district English learner plan reviews coming back. We're doing the final reviews. We have been referencing them throughout the school year, and we're set to review and send them back in March, and then coronavirus hit. So once we accept that, your InduStar person must submit it as a PDF on the submissions tab to archive it. If you have questions, please contact your EL specialist that was on the review or myself. We have to have all these reviewed, revisions made, and final copy uploaded on the submissions tab by May 28th. Okay, this is a reminder. Rest of this is mainly announcements. ESOL Institutes, there are 4 sites. The deadline to apply is Friday for primary consideration. Then after that, you can keep applying, and if they have openings, they can keep accepting. The summer portion has been transitioned to a virtual format via a combination of synchronous and asynchronous work. Okay. We do have some summer DESE PD options for ESOL and English learners. There are these 2 workshops that we were going to come to every co-op and deliver, but now we are offering them 6 times on repeat, and you may register for any of the 6 times that work. There's one on navigating the RTI and assessment process for English learners, and another one on enhancing family and community engagement, specifically looking at Transact as well as some other tools. The RTI one is in the morning, and the family and community engagement one is in the afternoon. You can attend any combination of them. There are descriptions and Zoom links here, and registration will be on ESC Works soon. Everyone's trying to get ESC Works numbers quickly. All of this was because we had to change most of our DESE PD from in-person to virtual very quickly. Okay. Other PD at the ADE Summit, it's virtually done. There will be a session on EL data entry that will be recorded. We'll have an updated district English learner plan for non-Title III districts webinar in August. And intentional planning practice is another training we're doing, and with cohorts at Northwest, Dawson, and Northeast. I have the dates there. If you're interested in that, please contact me. We've been working with specific districts on that, but if you're interested, let me know. And then the EL specialists that are pictured here, they're offering different PD at specifics, co-ops, ESOL Coordinator 101, ELP standards, systematic English language development. They've been emailing that out to each co-op's ESOL coordinator. So feel free to reach out to them as well to try to find something that may help you. And finally, a reminder that there are some COVID-19 supports for English learners on the DESE COVID-19 webpage. There's 2 items there, as well as in the LPA 21 Live Binder. We have a tab called EL Resources During Coronavirus that are things that are coming in since we made those 2 English learner considerations and supports documents. So I know that this was a lot of information, and mainly we were wanting to address the entry and exit criteria situation. And I hope this has made it a little more clear for you. Please let us know if you have further questions about it. Hopefully, if you're on this call, it's because you're on the English Learner Listserv, but if not, you need to be on that listserv. That's where we send out announcements about all of our trainings, any updates, etc. So there's some directions here on how to sign up, and then a reminder of who your support team is so that you can contact any of us. So are there any final questions before we go?
We have questions about the ESOL Institute. One says, if you haven't been in over 5 years, can you attend even if you already have the endorsement?
Not generally. However, you may contact a site near you to ask if there's a specific session you could participate in, but we can't allow people to go through the whole thing again. We can't afford it. So.
I also have something about the summit.
The ADE Summit is still the same week. I don't know exactly which days they are, or it is. It's sometime that week of June 15th.
It looks like
It's
Jana
on
responded to it.
16th through the 18th. Okay. Okay, someone said go back to the listserv address. That is the listserv to enroll. And I saw that Alan put it out there as well. I have not seen I don't think I have seen the link about the ADE Summit. I know they are trying to get that finalized. I'll also send it out to the English Learner listserv just so you have it if you subscribe to that. Okay, the recording for this will be sent through the listserv as well as posted on the DESE English Learners webpage. So, well, I appreciate all of your attention today and for being willing to go a few minutes extra to get the information. We are here to help you through this process. I know there's been a lot of changes for all of us personally, professionally, and just as a society. So I want to thank you for the work you're doing for English learners, and thank you for just hanging in there. Please know that we're here to support you. So just reach out to any of us and we will try to help you through this process. Okay, so the updated manual will be coming soon as well. So, thank you for your help and with your questions, because it helps us know how to help you when we get your questions. Okay, well, thank you, and we'll start.